Okay, just going to let you know that today's video is going to require me getting pretty vulnerable about something that I used to experience when I had anxiety. And even though sometimes these things are hard for me to talk about, I know just how important they are to talk about so that I can help those of you who are struggling with anxiety now and really relate to you and let you know that you are not alone in thoughts and the things that happen regarding your anxiety. I have been there. I know how toxic and crazy your mind can feel when you're living with anxiety. And I hope by sharing this with you today, my experience that I'm going to share in this video, that you feel like you are heard and understood. Let's get into today's video. Today I wanted to share with you a toxic mindset that I used to have about my anxiety that actually made my anxiety worse. So during the 15 years where I struggled with chronic anxiety, during that time there was a lot of negativity and negative thoughts that were happening in my head, and these negative thoughts would turn into really strong core beliefs that I believed to be true, and they were based off of my lived experiences. I would experience things when I had anxiety, and I would experience them so much that they would become a pattern that I would just think that it's true. It's something that has to be true because I've experienced it so much, so that's just the way I am. This is the way life works. And that's the thing about living with anxiety, is that you live in this survival mode. You live in this mode that is meant to get you out of a dangerous situation and to guide you towards feeling better. And the problem with living in survival mode is that you don't have full access to your intuition and to rational thinking thoughts and a rationally thinking mind, because you are just so scatterbrained with being worried about what's happening in the current moment, and you're in this survival mode. And when you're in that mode, you really develop these thoughts and these mindsets that are not in service to you. So this specific toxic mindset that I used to have when I had anxiety was thinking that when I was feeling anxious, if I just felt more anxious and more worried about something, that the situation would turn out okay. So in a nutshell, what this toxic mindset really was me telling myself that the more I excessively worried and agonized and got anxious over a situation, that would make it be okay. That would make it better. And if I didn't worry enough about it and I didn't get a lot of anxiety over it, then maybe it would end up turning out badly. I hope that makes sense, but let me just kind of clarify that a little further for you. So let's say, for example, I used to have a lot of anxiety over my physical health. I struggled with my physical health, specifically with my digestive health, for many, many years. So a lot of anxiety would be coming from that. So let's say, for example, there was a situation one day where I was just feeling really, really ill, and it made me feel anxious because I was feeling ill and I didn't know what to do about it and I didn't know what was wrong. That's when this toxic mindset would come in and tell me that, you know what, you've felt ill like this before, and every time you felt ill like this, you would get so worked up and so worried and so anxious, and it always ended up being fine. So that was the toxic mindset I had, was that if I was anxious or worried about something, let me just add more anxiety and more worry to it, and then it will be okay. Because even though I used to have all these health issues, they were never really serious enough to be, hospitalized or need a surgery or anything crazy like that. So my irrational survival mode mind would tell me that the more I worried about that thing, the more likely it was that everything was going to be fine, because it has always been fine in the past. And I'm sure you can imagine just how toxic that mindset is. So this toxic mindset used to be the thing that would make me admit myself to the ER. I would just have a really overwhelming feeling of something bad happening in my body, feeling like I couldn't breathe, feeling like I was going to pass out. Whatever the negative feeling was, I would have that happen due to my underlying anxiety, and then I would get really worried about it, and I would worry myself so much to the point where I would go to the ER and I would think that I'm dying, that I need a doctor to look at me because something must be really wrong. And it was all due to that mindset that I got to the point where I had to admit myself to the ER because I got that worried. That mindset that I had going on in the back of my head was, something feels bad in your body, just worry about it and it'll be better. Or just keep worrying about it, keep being more anxious about it, keep worrying to the point where you're going to feel sick, and it's always going to be fine because it's always fine in the past. Because my experience with admitting myself to the ER would be that I go to the ER in a panic and I feel like I'm dying, and I go through the triage, and the person that triages me seems to be fine and, think that I'm okay. But they don't tell me that, right? They never really tell you that because they can't, because they're not doctors. So they triage you and they make you wait in the ER. And I would always be that person that was waiting in the ER for hours and hours and hours, because the way the ER works is that they take the more critical patients first, the people who have the bigger problems first. So I would sit in the ER for hours and hours and hours until I finally saw a doctor who told me that I was completely fine. So that's really where this mindset came from, this toxic mindset of thinking that the more I worry about something, the likelihood it is that I'm going to be fine. It always came from this, experience of me getting so worked up about something to the point where I can be so worked up about it that I admit myself to the ER, that I know that everything's going to be fine because I get myself that worried, and then I don't have to, stay overnight at a hospital or do crazy tests or anything like that. It never gets to that point. So my mind created this thought pattern and this belief that as long as I worried excessively about something and worried myself sick is a common phrase that some people use. You worry yourself sick. I would worry myself sick thinking in my mind that if I did that, I was going to be okay. And the reason why this mindset is so toxic is because it actually perpetuates and encourages my anxiety and anxious thought patterns. This mindset was telling me, get more anxious, get more worried, and it will help. And what it did is not help at all. It actually made things worse. I would worry to the point where I had to admit myself to the ER. So even that is just proof that thinking that way was not doing me any good. It was not in service to me to wind myself up that tightly, because all it did was make me more worried and make me feel more anxious, which is not the goal of what you want to do when you have anxiety. You don't want to feel more anxious, but that's what this thought pattern made me think. So if you struggle with anxiety, maybe this is a mindset that you can relate to. Maybe you've felt the same way before. Maybe you've had experiences where you felt like there was something wrong in your body. You felt so anxious, you felt so ill that you thought you were going to die, and you checked yourself into the ER. This is something that is really common for people who have anxiety because they don't know what's going on in their mind and in their body, and they just know that they feel like they are in danger. And again, this is because you are living in a survival mode. You are living in a mode that is only really supposed to be reserved for when you're in actual dangerous situations. Like if there's a bear chasing you and you have to get away or you might die, that is what survival mode is reserved for. But the problem is when we experience anxiety on such a regular basis, we end up living in that survival mode permanently, which means we are more prone to feeling anxious and feeling worried and having negative health effects due to living in that state of survival. And the interesting thing is that it wasn't until I started doing mindset work that I realized that that old belief that I had about worrying enough to the point where I felt sick would mean that I was going to be okay. That negative mindset I had, I didn't even realize it was negative and toxic until I started doing mindset work, and I was able to look at it from a different perspective. Because the problem is when you are living in a state of anxiety, you're living in this anxiety bubble and you can't really access rationality and, clear-mindedness. So when you get outside of that anxiety bubble and you're this third-party perspective looking inward, that's when you can really see that some of the beliefs and mindset and thoughts that you entertain are actually really negative for you, and they are actually making you feel worse. And that's the great thing about mindset work, is it really helps you to analyze and look at your life and look at your beliefs and look at the way you're thinking and say, okay, do I want to think this way? Is thinking this way and believing these things actually helping me live my life better? And if it's not, then doing mindset work provides you with the tools you need in order to change those negative thought patterns and beliefs and turn them into positive ones that empower you, that are in service to you, that help you live a happier and more positive life. Because the thing is, the thoughts and the beliefs and the mindsets that you develop when you're living in a state of chronic anxiety, in a state of survival mode, are not the beliefs and thoughts that the internal part of you actually believes. The soul version of you that isn't anxious, the soul version of you that lives a life without anxiety, that person is never going to believe in those negative thoughts that the anxious old version of you used to believe. It's like being two separate people. Living in a survival mode just makes you develop these negative and kind of crazy beliefs because it is trying to protect you and it is trying to just get you through whatever you're currently going through. And the beliefs that are developed in that state of mind are not the true beliefs that you want to really believe deep down inside. They are just coping mechanism beliefs. So that old toxic mindset I had was actually a coping mechanism that I had developed as an anxious person just to try to rationalize some of the fears and worries and anxieties and negative feelings that I had. It was the only way my brain can kind of rationalize why I always felt so uptight, why I always felt anxious. It tried to turn it and spin it in a way to say, well, this is just the way you operate because you know in the past you've worried and gotten so stressed and anxious about things so many times and it always ended up being okay. So this is a survival mechanism, a coping mechanism that my brain developed in a time where I just was in too chronically stressed and too chronically anxious of a state to really develop healthier and more positive mindsets. And I'll be the first to tell you that once you get out of that anxiety bubble and you're able to see things from a new, different, and fresh perspective, that's when you're really able to analyze all of the beliefs you've ever had in your life, and you can pick out the ones that you developed based out of fear or worry or anxiety, and you can look at those and they honestly just don't even speak to you anymore. They don't make sense to you anymore. And that's how I feel about this specific belief I used to have. Looking at it from the person that I am now, the person that has a very positive mindset, that knows how to process my emotions, that doesn't experience chronic anxiety anymore, I look at that old mindset and I go, what was I thinking? Like, why did I believe that? That was so bad for me to believe that. That only made me feel worse. But the thing was, I couldn't see things from that perspective when I was living in that survival mode. So really, what you need to do is do the work to get yourself out of that survival mode, to stop being so anxious and start empowering yourself to learn about your mindset and how your mind works, and start practicing the tools and the practices that you need to practice in order to move yourself from a negative anxious mindset to a more positive and happy mindset. Because when you can do that, that's when you can really make the conscious decision to choose what you want to believe and the thoughts that you want to entertain. And that's really the secret to living a happier life. So I hope me sharing this experience about this old toxic mindset I used to have with you was helpful. I hope that if you have some sort of toxic mindset like this and you can relate to what I'm saying here, I hope you can see that there is another version of the story that you could be living. There is another way to live life on the other side of anxiety. And if you're interested in finding out how you can do that, then I encourage you to check out the resources that I have available for you. So I have a free resource called the Free Negative Mindset Assessment Guide. And really what it will allow you to do is look at your mindset, you take a little assessment survey, and you see if you're struggling with a negative mindset. And I explained the connection between a negative mindset and anxiety and how those two things feed off of each other and what you can do about it to start improving it today. So you can get that free guide. I will link it in the description below. And if you want to go a step further and you're ready to say goodbye to anxiety, you're so tired of feeling anxious and you just want to know how to get out of that negative state and how to start being more positive and how to start changing your life, then you're ready for my course, Shift Your Mindset 101. In Shift Your Mindset 101, I teach you about all of the tools and modalities and mindset shifts that I made at a time when I was experiencing chronic anxiety and how those things helped me overcome anxiety for good. You'll also learn the methods to improve your mindset, to start living with a more positive mindset instead of a negative mindset. And this course is just the perfect course for all Mindset 101, learning how your mind works and how to make those lasting positive changes that will help you to live a happier and better life. So if you want to learn more about Shift Your Mindset 101, I'll drop the link in the description below. That's all I have to share for today's video. Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you tuning in and being here. And if you want to hang out with me in between uploads, make sure you follow me on Instagram because I am on there every day and I'm talking about all these same sort of things, mindset tips, anxiety tips, sharing personal stories to help you overcome your anxiety. So make sure you follow me on Instagram so we can connect there. And if you can relate to what I was saying in this video, if you can relate to having this sort of toxic mindset about certain things in your life, then let me know. I would love to hear down in the comments what you're experiencing, or you can DM me on Instagram. My DMs are always open and available for you to chat with me there. And that wraps up today's video, so I will see you next time. Bye.